or corrections to the meeting that is in your packet. Okay. I'd like to make a motion to approve the minutes. Thank you. And so all in favor of approving the minutes from July? Okay. Anyone opposed? All right. So we're going to move forward and approve the minutes. Thank you so much. To give you all an update on different things going on within the commission. We left off the last meeting talking about hiring, so I want to start off with that. We've made some good progress in this area with some good developments to share. I have had different people in the administration helping me with things that we need to get done. Alexis Confer from City Hall has been helping me with hiring. Wendy Trull, we have some staff members on loan to us. Wendy Trull is a senior advisor to the Civic Engagement Commission. She's on loan from the Mayor's Office of Contracts, and she's helping me really set up operations and programs. The law department is supporting us with some legal staff time. Bonnie Akosas, I think you know him, who is with the Charter Revision Commission. He's an attorney with the law department, and Clava Brodsky, who's the Corp Counsel Fellow there. They'll be helping us navigate the legal questions, and this will also allow us to get a better sense of how much legal support the commission needs in order to make a better assessment of whether we need a full-time attorney on board. Amy Sandeman is currently a senior advisor at the Mayor's Office of Criminal Justice. She's also founder and former executive director of Groundswell. She's a lot of experience in public engagement and using the arts for social change. She'll be helping us think about participatory budgeting and other programs, laying out the strategy for that. I'm very excited to share that Lydia Del Nagare, originally from Montana, joined us last week as our full-time AmeriCorps service member, and she's going to be working with us on creating a needs assessment for community boards. We know that we're tasked with helping community boards build their capacity, particularly in the area of land use, urban planning, technical assistance, and interpretation. It's very general, so we want to try to nail down a little bit more what that looks like on the ground and what are community boards doing and what do they need help with so that we can add value. We have made two offers on two full-time positions. They've been accepted. So they're going through the process of onboarding, and hopefully we'll have those people on board by the next meeting. And then the other positions also have narrowed down candidates, and hopefully we'll make offers. So things are falling into place, and I am no longer staff of one, which is great. Yes. In the next section, we're going to be talking about the bylaws. Before we move on, Sarah? Yeah.
May I ask what those positions are that were recently filled, those two positions that you mentioned?
Yes. One is the community coordinator position, which is the person tasked with building a lot of the relationships for the commission. And the other one is the civic engagement support specialist, who will also be helping with relationship building, and will have a role actually with you all, keeping us coordinated, and also will help the internal operations administration. Yeah.
Other job descriptions that you can share with us?
Yes, I definitely welcome. Lillian, you haven't been with us, so I almost feel like we should just do a very quick go-around of intros, because you haven't seen people in person. So maybe you want to start, and then we'll do a go-around. Why don't you go ahead and start?
I'm William Perez.
Yeah, make sure, by the way, make sure that your mic is on.
Oh, it's on now.
Yeah, when you talk.
So Lillian Perez, I think you've seen my name before. Obviously, I've seen all of your names before. I'm the Bronx Commissioner. My daily job is Vice President of Government and Community Relations for Montefiore Health System, which includes also the College of Einstein. And we have 4 counties, so we're very, very busy, but I'm really excited to be here and represent the Bronx. I come with a lot of government experience. I have 18 years in a combination between the New York State Senate and the Attorney General's office, and I moved to become an executive of Montefiore about 2 years ago. So hope to really work together with you.
Chuck, you want to go next?
I'm Chuck Apelian. I'm the Vice Chair, Community Board 7, and I'm the Queens representative to the Commission.
Thank you. Anthony, would you mind coming up here? Thank you.
She moves it around.
Donna, if you would.
Yes, I'm Donna Gill, Community Board 10, and I'm the Manhattan Mayor's representative for the commission.
I'm Anastasia Somoza, and in my day job, I work for the Speaker of the City Council as the representative who works through our Community Engagement Division to represent the needs of disabled New Yorkers. So that includes accessibility, a lot of transportation work, but basically anything that impacts disabled New Yorkers. I work with the Speaker and the Council to address those issues, and I'm the first one to ever fill that role at the Council, so it's been really exciting over the last year and a little bit more to better represent my community for the city. And I also do similar work outside of the Council on disability advocacy, so that's my role, and I'm happy to be here working with all of you.
Hi, it's nice to see everybody again after our break. I'm Eve Barron. I'm the chairperson of the Pratt Institute Graduate Center for Planning and the Environment, and I'm also a professor there.
Good morning. My name is Mark Diller. I am the Manhattan Borough President's representative to this commission. I'm a member of Community Board 7, but this time in Manhattan, not in the Bronx, in Queens, and serve on various committees there, including chairing its preservation committee. So I spend a lot of time in this room.
I'm so sorry. I forgot to mention that I'm the Brooklyn Borough President's appointee.
Anthony Horman, appointee by the Speaker. Appointee by the Speaker by day. I work for the United Federation of Teachers, and I do a lot of work with parent and community groups throughout the city of New York.
I just wanted to chime in. I forgot to mention I'm the other appointee of Speaker Corey Johnson.
Hi, everyone. Linda Lee, president of KCS, Korean Community Services. Also a member of Community Board 11 out in Northeast Queens. I think that's it.
Keep it short. Good morning. My name is Aneta Sicharan, and I run Chaya Community Development Corporation, and I am the mayor's Queens appointee.
Hi, Amy Breedlove, residing in Brooklyn. I'm appointee of the mayor on this commission. I am the president of the Cobble Hill Association, which is a civic organization. I'm also a member of Urban Quotient, which is an architecture firm that does affordable and supportive housing. And then a number of other roles, but those are the two major ones for now.
Lillian? No, I don't know her. How you doing? My name is Jose Hernandez. Sorry. I'm with United Spinal Association. I don't know what else. Yep.
So I don't know if everyone signed in, so I'm just going to pass this around one more time. Okay, so we were talking about the job postings. I will send those around. Just for our internal awareness, some of the roles are gonna get a little tweaked because, as I mentioned, for instance, if we have support from the law department, then we don't need to hire a lawyer, and the position was advertised as general counsel and director of admin, so that will change. So once it's all set, then I will share them with you, for sure, and would love to get your help getting, people to apply. Yeah.
With respect to the AmeriCorps volunteer or service member who is going to be looking at the needs assessment for community boards, we obviously have a few community board members on our commission. Without interfering with that work, it would be wonderful if there were an opportunity to interact with her so that we could share what we know and perhaps unbundle a few things.
Totally. Really would love to get your input. And I actually sent around, I hope I didn't miss you, I did send around an email introducing her, but I'll ask her to, at the end, maybe if there's time, you can connect in person, but she will definitely like to sit with you and learn from your wisdom. And anyone else who may not currently be on a community board, but has had that experience or has insights to share. I know that Eve, we talked about this, so we'll make sure that she comes to you. And if somehow I missed emailing you and you want to be a part of this, please get in, email me and remind me so that we can make sure. Because for all of the programs that we have to take on, it's so important to collect the knowledge base and wisdom of the people who are doing this work, because we're not inventing anything, right? We're trying to add value. So having your insights on that will be really helpful. Any other questions or thoughts about the hiring piece? Okay. The bylaws, we do have a draft of the bylaws, and we had Donna and Mark had volunteered to help us review, and we're going through that process. So once that draft is ready for collective sharing, we'll bring that to the meeting to talk about. How are people doing with their emails? Their CEC emails, which, as a reminder, we did because we want to, just make sure that your personal emails are not foiled in case, which hopefully will never happen, but if it does, we want to give you the ability to have, the CEC official emails. So are people using those emails? Okay, so we need to make sure that you have access to it. Anyone else? Has everyone else been able to get into their email? What? No, you got your login. No, yeah, your login, and okay. So, well, I'll make sure that you get that. And I wanted to recommend that if you are emailing me for anything, like I've been sort of BCCing everyone's personal accounts just to alert you that it's there, but I recommend that if you're ever emailing me for anything, to use your CEC account rather than just help to get in the practice of that, yeah.
I'm wondering if anybody else has had the same problem I have, which is trying to link the CEC email with my general Gmail email so that I don't have, so that I get it comes in real time to a single feed. I then respond using, as you suggest, but the system is resisting allowing me to link those. I don't know if that's just my the same inability that led me to lose all my edits on the bylaws, or whether it's my whether it's something having to do with the system rather than my lack of savvy.
Okay.
I'm having the same issue, and the reason I can't really access it all the time is I realize I use my phone more than a computer, and so I really need that to be linked so that I can have access easily to this email.
Can we talk after and see if we have the same problem or different?
Sure. Yeah, I mean, we can do it to help me troubleshoot whatever the issues are. Hopefully, there's a solution. I mean, I have logged in using, well, you all know how to do that with Microsoft Online, because that's how you're getting on anyway. It's just integrating with your other accounts. Okay. So now we're going to turn to programmatic updates. At the last meeting, we had distributed handouts with an overview of the Participatory Budgeting Committee. That committee application just went online on Friday. So I'm going to send around the link and would love to get your help circulating the application. There is an overview on the website about the responsibilities of the committee and also the kind of people we're looking for. In your packet today, we put in there the section on participatory budgeting from the charter, so we can review what the charter is asking us to do as far as membership of this advisory board. And we have given a deadline of October 8th, so any help you can provide to circulate this application would be great. Hopefully, we'll get a bunch of applications and we'll be able to stick to that deadline, but we will assess as the time comes near. Any questions on the participatory budgeting advisory?
Just one question. Is the council working with us at all on this, since it does go through the council members?
Well, what's the it? The it in your sentence referring to participatory budgeting? Is that what you mean? That it's currently happening through the council?
Yes.
Okay. So part of the job of the CEC is going to be to figure out a strategy for participatory budgeting that's citywide. It may not go through city council. Currently, not all council members participate, so we're obligated to create a citywide strategy. The charter does name borough presidents and community boards and any other elected officials. So obviously, anything we do has to be aligned with councils, and we've been talking to council central staff and council member Lander, and we'll be talking with other council members about how to create a process that's aligned. Like, we wouldn't want to have vote week, for instance, be in different weeks. But I believe the CEC and the city's process will be separate from just hopefully parallel tracking. But what it looks like on the ground is going to be something we need to work on and figure out. And that's part of the job of the advisor on participatory budgeting, is to work with the advisory committee to really figure out what that's going to look like. But we've been keeping in touch with council on this. And I also really want to encourage everyone, if you are not already doing it, if your council member is conducting a PB process, to please go and, try to participate, see what it's like, so you can also bring ideas and thoughts to the commission and the advisory group about how you'd like to see it working.
Sarah, is it likely that some of the members that had been working with Councilmember Lander's office on, participatory budgeting in general, the group that created a document that it was suggested to us as commissioners we read, is it likely that some of them will be a part of the advisory committee, or is that going to be completely separate?
Well, we've talked, I think you mean participatory budgeting project?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, there are certainly thought leaders in this field, so we're we've been talking to them all along, and we'll continue to keep that conversation going. Some people affiliated with the council's committee, either, prior years might choose to apply. There's nothing barring people from serving on both committees, and we've also talked long-term about how to create a committee that's responsible for the entire process, as opposed to having multiple bodies. But we're not quite there yet to sort of merge everything together.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay. Any other questions on PB? Yeah.
I guess the question is a timing one. Many of us have been involved in PB at a council level,
Yeah.
and that begins with a council member making the decision to participate and setting aside a certain amount of capital funding that would be dedicated to whatever the results of the PB process would be.
Right.
Where in the process do we come to understand what the citywide funding commitment will be, and who makes that commitment, and where does it come from? Is that part of what this advisory committee will be working on?
Well, yes, I mean, it is a mayor's decision about, and mayor and OMB, and we've been talking to OMB about sort of helping to figure that out, about how much will be allocated for this process, and hopefully we will, be able to share that in the near future. And what was your other question? Just about, yeah.
Essentially how that will play out in terms of funding, because that may or may not, among other things, impact a council member who currently participates, what will happen in his or her district. But that's all to be determined.
Yes,
I
to
assume
be.
that's the work of the advisory committee, but there's another layer that you've just shared that I thank you for, which is that there's so the budgeting piece, if I understand you correctly, will come from OMB and the mayor's office, and then the rollout will be the work of this advisory committee.
And to the commission and staff, yeah, in
Very good.
partnership with, it's not gonna be possible for one staff member to implement a citywide PB strategy. So we're gonna have to build a lot of partnerships to have this, roll out over time. And so we've been talking to we'll talk to different agency partners about how to do outreach, we'll talk to CBOs, et cetera. Okay?
Is this still working on the assumption that we're helping those that are participating? What about those that are not, council members?
We will need to talk with council members who aren't to make sure that that when we are in everyone's district, that everyone is good with it. Perhaps they'll join, perhaps they won't. I'm really hard to say at this point, but we're going to make sure that we talk to people who are and are not.
My question is, are we going to go out to say to the half dozen, whatever, people that aren't and encourage, or we're going to lobby them, per se, quote unquote, to join into the program or show them the advantages of it? Because that's the difficulty. You do have districts that are not participating.
Yes, I don't think we need to we won't be lobbying. I think over time, many of the council members have joined, right? And gradually, I think council's central office has been encouraging people. So we'll certainly work with council on that. Yeah.
I have a question. Sarah, City Council has started,
Yes.
and they've sent out applications. And we're in the process of defining or getting things together. Are we working in tandem with the City Council to do this? Because as Charles was saying, there are members that do not participate, but then there are also members who do, who may take offense to an outside body coming in and talking about participatory budgeting when they already have, their set way in which they want to do it. So that's something that
Well,
we might-
our goal and intention is definitely to align this process with councils. The charter specifies that we need to roll out a citywide participatory budgeting process. It does not tell us that we need to do that at the council district level. So it's up to us to figure out what would make sense that would be aligned with councils. We can do it at the borough level, we can do it at, I don't know, there's all different ways to break up geographies, right? So we just need to figure out and our charge is really to make sure that people who are not participating, currently are not civically engaged, are brought into this process. So I think we need to really figure out what's the best geography that's going to allow us to do that.
I have a question. So
Yeah.
is our main goal really to pay more attention, care for more, and come up with a real strategy to engage the public, and less intrude or tell the council and those that are and aren't what to do. We can put out the best practices, as, you know, we can use experts, and we should just concentrate on, because you can put a hearing together, no one shows up, and it's still a public hearing, and it's recorded. But if the goal of this body is really to make sure that our constituencies do get notification properly, and we encourage them the best possible way to go and have a voice and express their concerns or their support for community projects, I think if we can make that one of our main goals, we are going to be successful without handicapping those that are doing a good job, because some of them are doing a good job.
Yep.
So maybe that should be one of our main goals.
Yeah, agreed. I mean, I think it's really both and. Did you? Yeah.
And I wanted to bookend on that, because that's a perfect intro to the thought that I was about to share, which is that the other end of that goal ought to be equity. That I hail from the Upper West Side of Manhattan, which is known for many things. Being shy is not one of them. And so we have council members who already participate and who receive some fair share of that funding. I would be concerned if we create another opportunity for my Upper West Side neighbors to dip twice into the pot, with all apologies to my neighbors, where there may be other folks in council districts either who don't participate or who don't have the ability to participate, and to make sure that participatory budgeting is more equitable citywide, which I understand to be the motivation behind the charter amendment in the first place. It's not so that we get two dips at one. Thank you.
Yes. I'm sorry, I remembered, Holly, are you still on the line? Yeah, she was sitting in traffic, but she may no longer be on the line.
I have
Yeah.
a thought. It seems like there are some, really good expertise in this area. Would it make sense, in addition to the advisory committee that we're going to set up, would it make sense to have a subcommittee of commissioners who have a lot of experience and thoughts and ideas to, starting now, work in between meetings to flesh out some thoughts and present to the commission? I worry that in this sort of forum, there's just a lot of really good thoughts and ideas that get thrown out, and I want to make sure that we, as commissioners, stay engaged in the developing of what the thing looks like in between
Yes,
meetings, and support you
of
and your
course.
team in that.
That's a really great idea. I'm wondering who has participated in PB and would like to contribute to a working group or a committee, their thoughts. Mark and Amy and Donna and Murad. I think we're gonna need to call on everyone, because you all really need to be thinking about what are the networks and groups of people that we should really be involving in PB and provide input on that. Certainly, that's sort of like the baseline that I think we would want to expect of each commissioner. In addition to that, if you have thoughts on strategy, like what has worked, what has not worked, and that's something else that we will also learn from council, right? Like what's working, what's not working, because they're doing an amazing job all across the city working with council members and their staff to implement this. And I know that it is not an easy feat. I mean, it is a very time-consuming process to build public participation, engagement, get people thinking, talking about what's really needed in their community. So we definitely welcome anyone's input on all of this. Yeah.
When I express my thoughts and my concerns about the civic engagement of community members, in my experience, what I've seen is communities that are very organized and know how to voice their opinions and represent different sectors. I'm talking about the ones that really don't have those platforms. Not the traditional community board members that are ready to scream and have their own priorities, or CBOs that have their own needs. They want money to build, I don't know, a daycare, so therefore they'll turn out 100 people and get the support they need to be able to make it to the top 3. those I think we know who they are, and I know no matter what we do, they're gonna be there. I'm talking about real residents of communities. I come from the Bronx, where you don't have the civic engagement level that the Upper West Side has. And I want to make sure we go into the bases of those communities and speak to them about what are the pressuring points here? Do you need sidewalks? Do you need, safer streets? What is it? And not rely on the traditional civic groups of these communities. That's what I'm really more interested to really, how do we have resources to really, I don't know, use the Board of Elections data, the registries of all the homeowners of those communities. Can the city provide us with more information that is less attached to a board, to a community board, to a city council political database? Like, I'm super interested to see how we can really motivate regular folks that work 9 to 5.
That's a great point. Murad?
So I think it would be, excuse me, so participatory budgeting has been like around for a minute at this point, and just one minute. And I think that there's been success in that program, specifically within obviously the civic happy communities, but also in the communities that are not generally civic happy. So if you look to see what's happened in different communities across Brooklyn, you'll see that communities who've historically not been engaged in the process have become engaged. And because participating within civic participatory budgeting doesn't mean that you have to be a citizen, you don't there's like a lower age threshold. You see some of the communities that have some of the lowest voter turnouts have the highest participatory budgeting turnouts. And I think that we can look at the communities that are already participating within PB to see what they're doing, and then how do we implement that across the board. And I think that it's going to, the success of that campaign will only be determined by the investment that the city puts into it. So if you look at where the council PB programs have been successful, it's because there's an enormous amount of input and support from the council member and their staff, who then build out a team that will run it. So I think that for PB itself, it's something more along the lines of like, you get what you put into it. And how do we help standardize what we're putting into it to make it more successful?
Yeah, really good thoughts.
I need two clarifications, please. If we were going to a forum, and I'm Joe Q. Public, and this is a terrific idea. I love participatory budget. My council member doesn't participate in participatory budget. What now? Because I'm very frustrated, because obviously there's no way to go with that. And then I'd like clarification. Mark, you said something before, I'm confused, about double dipping. That implicates that there's two pots of money, or that you have an opportunity. I didn't understand what that was about.
My understanding is that there will be two pots of money, that council members will be participating in participatory budgeting, and then there will be a pot of money that comes effectively from ONB and the mayor. And so depending on how the mayoral or OMB pot of participatory funding is made available, and to whom outreach is done, it is conceivable to me that and to Lillian's point, there are some groups, in my district it happens to be school groups that are very effective, because that's a project size that fits within the PB model. When you're talking about building senior centers or youth centers, that generally is beyond the $1 million level that council members have available, let alone the idea that they would put all that money behind one project.
So why the purpose of the duplicity? Why are we having two pots of, I'm still very confused.
Well, that's the nature of the ballot initiative that was on the ballot last November and was passed. So as I understand it, the process now is to figure out what to do with what the amendment, the charter amendment that has been adopted, how that is rolled out, not whether or not it makes sense to have the two pots of money, because I think we do now.
Yeah.
I think the idea is we want to give New Yorkers more funds.
Right.
With
I
which to
understand.
participate through. There are different avenues to do it. Actually, I believe Borough President Eric Adams is also contributing to the PB process. I think he allocates certain amount of money to council members in Brooklyn who are participating. So they're different, and there's also to put schools are engaging in participatory budgeting. So there are different streams of money that are coming into participatory budgeting.
Well, that would answer
So-
my other question. Then if
Yeah.
the borough presidents are giving money, then Joe Q. Public, if the council member is not participating, could get it from a borough-wide or another source. That's
Yeah.
different. I didn't
Potentially.
understand
And
that.
so that's where the CEC process comes in,
Okay.
right? And that's why it's create a process of citywide participatory budgeting, because the current process is not citywide.
Right.
So we're going to
And-
add
Okay.
value.
Okay.
$1 million
create more ways for
doesn't
more
get
people to
you
join.
very much. You can get a lamppost for $1 million at this point. So I think that the increase in funding is desperately needed. And what we've seen where participatory budgeting has been successful is because there's schools who are like, we need air conditioners. We need to upgrade our bathroom. We need to upgrade our gymnasium.
Understood.
And the bathroom in itself will cost $500,000. And then if someone wants a different project outside of the community, outside of that school building, it would cost even more. So what you see is the minimal investment being $1 million from council members. In some areas in Brooklyn, you do have the borough president's additional funds that you can tap into, but that's more so for borough-wide projects, not necessarily a smaller one. And everything, I think one thing that I learned in round one of PB was how expensive everything is. And the expense only increases over time, and it takes a very long time to actually implement these projects too. So the additional funds are desperately needed. So it's not like, you know, two different pots. I think that if there were additional funds available, we would be able to actually realize more transformation within communities, not less.
Well, I think-
Sorry, go ahead.
I just wanted to add to that, while there are the really expensive things, there are also things that come before the vote, like $7,000 for a women's group who wants to have a rent a space for, a couple of times a month to gather because they're victims of domestic violence. So that was something that was on a recent vote, that was $9,000. So while there are the $500,000 projects, there are also these very small projects, and I think we want to, what I'm hearing from this group and this commission is really find a way that we can tap into both levels and then all of that in between as well.
Yeah, so it's a different, the capital, that was something I meant to say to you before in your question, the capital and expense. I think a lot of council dollars have been capital, I think some council members are doing some expense funds. But it's mostly been capital. You're absolutely right. And we'd like to see how we can also maybe add value to that and shift a little bit towards expense. Again, the proportion ratio, all of that is sort of TBD. I also think that the larger vision and goal for me for participatory budgeting, and I think for all of you, is that it's an avenue to build a greater consciousness about how tax dollars are used, right? And it's not even so much that it's different streams of money. This is all public money. So it's just one stream that belongs to, the people of New York City, that they hopefully will get more interested and curious and want to contribute to the decisions around that. So that's what we're trying to open up and create more of than what's already happening. All right, we've spent a lot of time talking about participatory budgeting, so I want to move to the next section. So we're trying to stay on time, hopefully with the presentation that will come. Just to update quickly on maybe, and this might not be another quick conversation, but poll site interpretation. The Language Assistance Advisory Board application is also online. I did send that link out to people, so please think about who would be appropriate candidates to apply and encourage their application. The deadline, since that was put up about a week ago, the deadline is October 1, so it's coming right up. Again, if we don't get applications or in the volume we need, we will extend that, but I really want to try to keep this moving. This Language Assistance Advisory Board has a really important responsibility to help review the methodology before it goes public. So if we're gonna do that on Jan 1, we need to have people in place. So we really have to get an advisory group assembled as soon as possible, like yesterday would have been great. But, so I'm gonna really count on you all to help with that.
Sarah, have we gotten many applicants?
No.
And what are we looking for in terms of qualifications
I mean,
or
so
background?
for both the advisory committee, there's a document on the website, which I will also share with you, which describes an overview of what the responsibilities are and the type of person who we want to serve on the committee. So I can share that with you, for sure.
Who's gonna staff that committee from the city?
The advisor for participatory budgeting is responsible for the advisory committee on PB. The advisor for language access and community boards is responsible for the language assistance advisory.
And which city agencies are gonna be part of that, other than obviously the Civic Engagement Commission?
So far, we have not, I mean, the charter doesn't specify or require any other agency to participate. It's a CEC advisory.
Okay, just because when we went through the battle or the advocacy for expanding language access within the city just a couple of years ago, there are a different couple of modules which when they presented on the pilot, I brought up how census data wasn't necessarily the best data to be using, and that layering it with LEP data, limited English proficiency data, is the better route to go. I think the city's planning, it's led by, I forgot the name of the guy. I'll send you the agency's name. But I think,
Are you talking about DCP?
yeah, Department of City Planning, and making sure that there's like a demographer from like Moya, and I'm not sure if Sam Solomon's still there, but he was part of those conversations as well.
Yeah, I mean, we are having internal conversations with Moya about their methodology, and so that's ongoing. I want to encourage, just as we were talking about for participatory budgeting, if there are commissioners here who really want to contribute to the language assistance work, we should touch base about that separately and figure out how to get your input and thoughts into that. There is nothing barring commissioners from serving on the advisory committee, so if you want to serve on the advisory committee, you can. You just apply, and yeah. But I guess it depends on people's time, how they want to do that. We know this year we'll have early voting. So that's something we're gonna need everyone to help get the word out about that. That'll be starting October 26th. We're talking with Democracy NYC about potentially doing a forum on informing people about their rights as voters, just broadly speaking, which will include interpretation. Because one thing I think we generally have not done such a great job about, but need to, is to let people know their rights to bring in their own interpreter into the poll site. Because no effort provided by any entity is ever going to be comprehensive and include every language and everyone that needs help. And people have that right, and they need to know that they have it, right? Yeah, Lillian.
I'm sorry, I have a lot of experience in this problem. And the biggest problem is not the voter, is actually the people that are working the polls. I had to pull out my badge to just ask them and tell them that these people have rights, and they're not supposed to show ID unless there's something wrong with their name, and that they're not supposed to, if they bring a child with them to vote and the child is interpreting, they give them hell. So I think we need to do also a job at educating those poll workers about people's rights. I mean, they give them such a hard time when they bring in their own interpreter. I mean, I take my grandmother and they give me a hard time. Now, you're not supposed to be in there. I know my rights. Who are you? What are you talking to me about? So it is very interesting to see the dynamic, and I've, obviously, because I come from politics, I've done every corner of the city of New York. I've participated in different elections, and it's so different depending on where you are. Queens and the Bronx is insane. Manhattan, it gets complicated once you're north of 125th. But if you're in the Upper West Side, you're dealing with different, different communities. But I just wanted to point out that as much education that we give the voters, oh boy, we have to work harder with the workers.
Yes, agreed. We have
And
a
that-
lot, we
that
have a
was
lot
gonna
to
be
do
my
to
point.
educate the public about this. Okay, so I'll keep you updated on whether that event is gonna happen and.
Anyway, because I'm really, this is like one of my issues. Is there anything we can speak maybe to the Board of Elections about? And I've taken the trainings. They're more about how to keep people away from voting. How do we better talk, engage with them about the possibilities of really training these folks? I'm not an ageist, but a lot of these people can't even hear when you talk to them, or understand you, or know that they can, refer you to an interpreter that's, I don't know, somewhere within the school cafeteria. You could barely find the interpreter. But anyway, I think that those folks need a better training. Maybe we can recommend this to the city, and the city can take it seriously.
I think, we are also by charter, again, the charter tells us that we're working collaboratively with all of the entities that are already working in every program area. So BOE is one of those. So we're gonna try to work with them to continue to add value to the work they're doing around educating people about their rights. So it's definitely, yeah, it's definitely have to get better at getting the word out about this stuff. All right, the last, yeah.
In defense of poll workers, because I happen to be one of them.
That's right.
So basically, what I try to do is to educate my colleagues that are there, and I've worked at several different sites. But definitely talking with the Board of Elections would be the way to go, and educating them. So when they educate the poll workers, at least they have all the information, because when they come around, they change everything. But when they're in training, they do not give them all of the information. And it's a lack of information and education that's causing all of this misunderstanding and controversy.
Thank you. Okay, on the community board stuff, we already talked about working on a needs assessment. And I've also been talking with DCP and OMB, who've been collecting or responsible for collecting needs statements from the community boards. They've created a better online process to submit those needs, which is great. Hopefully that helps community boards. And also, Jewett has been helping community boards with their websites. So after this meeting, we're actually gonna meet with Jewett, Lydia and I, and just get a better handle on what Jewett has been offering. Community boards are not mandated to have websites. We obviously hope that more and more will do that because it's such an important way to reach people who are online. But then again, there are lots of people who are not online. So we've got to do both, but websites is a good thing that we're gonna try to work through. The last thing before we turn to listening sessions is, we had talked last time about doing this, what is a CEC presentation. That PowerPoint is in development. Right now, the PowerPoint is pretty much focused on the charter, and I feel like it needs to maybe do a little bit more than just talk about what the charter says, and maybe even include like a little bit more of the historical perspective of like the Charter Revision Commission and why people even saw the need for a civic engagement commission, just so that we're, keeping that history alive as well. So we're gonna, add to that PowerPoint too, and maybe I'll send that around also for your more careful look and input. Yeah, Annetta.
So Sarah, is this PowerPoint going to be the tool that we used in the listening sessions? Is that the,
I think it's both. I think it's that plus if people want to go out and talk to groups yourselves. I had given you a version of it.
So
Yeah.
it's pretty interesting. So I do so much engagement because it's part of my job. So when I go, they recognize my name and they're like, oh, can you talk to us a little bit more about the work that the commission is doing? So I contacted you because I was invited to at least 3 sessions just to speak about the work of this commission, and it was super early on. It was like the day after the release went out. So I was like, I thank you because you gave me information, but they really want to know projects. They really want to know how they can communicate with us about their needs and their priorities. So I spoke vaguely about it, but they're waiting for us to really present a list of our initiatives and explain to them how they can be part of it. Really, that's what they're looking for.
Yep.
so we had a really robust conversation the last time we met about the listening sessions. And I just would love to hear.
Yep, that's actually the last thing that we're going to talk about
because
before
when I hear PowerPoint, it doesn't.
Yeah, I mean the PowerPoint.
It could be effective for a small segment of the audience.
Yeah.
That we need to engage.
Yeah, I mean, I think that we need to provide some at the listening sessions. Most of it will be listening, not talking at people, but we do need to provide some kind of intro to what the CEC does. So that's part of like why we would use that.
It could be worthwhile to produce a fact sheet, a very simple fact sheet, 1-pager in multiple languages as part of the toolkit of things that we develop.
Sarah, I
a
have
fact sheet on who we are.
Yeah, I mean, I just think PowerPoint, I think it's effective for a setting like this, but not beyond that.
Okay.
And so I'm just thinking in community, when we go out to do these listening sessions and we're engaging folks in any kind of community education, I'm thinking if we want something that's a takeaway, because there are different kinds of learners, right?
Right.
And it's just something that folks can take.
Okay.
In their
It's
language.
like a pamphlet or something, right?
Just like,
Yeah.
to be a very simple
CEC,
1-pager. I don't
yeah.
think we need to invest that much into it.
Okay.
Just a 1-pager that says the facts about the Civic Engagement Commission, the basics,
Okay.
right? And that should be updated as things evolve and change on a fairly regular basis.
I just have a clarifying question because I know we talked about, and I just want to clarify whether this is separate or connected to the listening sessions, because I know I was on one of the calls. But I thought we also talked about, since all of us have to like spread the word individually, more related to what Lillian was referring to about the commission, like if we get invited to speak, I think we talked about creating a standardized presentation deck that would allow us as commissioners to know how to speak about it at the community level. So that's separate from what we're talking about with the listening sessions, right?
Yeah, it is separate. I mean, we do have, there's different, we need to create standardized talking points that we can all use. That's what we're trying to, so we do need to do that.
So is that what when you say the presentation deck here, what is the CEC? That's what that is?
Yes.
Okay.
That's what that is.
Okay.
Thank you. Okay, next we're gonna go just talk a little bit about the listening sessions. So we had a call after the last meeting with a couple of the commissioners who were interested in talking more about this. At the end, we decided that we really want to try to get consultants to help us with this process. So after that meeting, we decided we were going to talk with Participatory Budgeting Project, and Hester Street Collaborative was another group that people had named. So I did talk to both of those groups and continuing those conversations. So hopefully we'll come to some conclusion around that, and also looking at other possibilities. One piece that I did want to mention, and this is where Eve comes in, I did go and speak with her class about the Civic Engagement Commission. She's like really bringing her students on board to talk about the CEC, so I wanted to ask if you could just share a little bit about what you're doing. And I did include your handout, but you'll talk about that. Yeah.
I'll try to be brief because
Yes.
I know there's lots to get to, but
We're gonna hopefully have NYC service around 12:15-ish.
yeah. I think we all bring an understanding that so much of the work that we're going to be doing out into the future is dependent on building relationships and relationships with, you know, the groups that we come from and from groups that we're in contact with. And, you know, as part of that, I, you know, in my role as the chairperson, I wanted to make sure that Pratt Institute had an early role in this. And, you know, in the city and regional planning program at Pratt Institute, you know, we really prioritize public participation and engagement, and so that's a big part of our curriculum. And, you know, I think that the principle behind that is very simple, that so many planning decisions that have taken place without the participation of people have resulted in just, you know, incredibly destructive projects like urban renewal and highways that divide neighborhoods. You know, it's not New York City simply, but all over the world, that when you remove people from a voice and decision making about their neighborhoods, then you have disastrous planning. So, you know, we at, you know, in our program attempt to teach students that the, you know, planning has to happen with communities, not for communities, and that engagement is a key part of that strategy. So, and that good planning is really pivots off the idea that people have a natural desire to participate in the future of their communities, you know, whether that's a physical community or a social community. I'm currently this semester teaching a very quick 1-credit 5-week class on participatory planning techniques, and I invited Sarah to come and speak with my students about the work of the Civic Engagement Commission. And we did a little participatory curriculum development and decided that, you know, the students were very interested in lending their skills and their thought and their work to a project that would support the work of the commission. So they're creating a project, a proposal rather, for a listening session. And it's intended to be kind of a blueprint for what we might do going forward. They you know, to really focus their efforts, they've identified a certain demographic in a certain area to work on. So they are looking at a hard-to-reach demographic, which is 15 to 24-year-olds, because they do have some particular insights into that group. And they wanted to look at Ridgewood, but as a neighborhood, it's very difficult to get data boundaries, so they're going to be looking at Reynoso's district, District 34. And the intention is to, it's not strictly just to introduce the work of the Civic Engagement Commission, because I think we want to go more deeply than that. We really want to have people understand neighborhood involvement as key to, you know, empowerment and, you know, a little bit of self-autonomy. So they're going to be building out a project where they're looking at stakeholder analysis and some power mapping to see who in that neighborhood, you know, is a decision maker and what the paths are to those decision makers. They're also going to be looking at key demographics. They're going to be coming up with outreach methods and identification of partners who can help support outreach. They're going to be looking at, you know, very tangible things like what's the venue? You know, what kind of space do we have to make this happen? They're going to be planning like the activities that are taking place in this forum. They're also going to be looking at indicators of effectiveness, you know, how effective this particular community engagement activity is. And then one thing that we talked about from the beginning of our work here was a way to have a feedback loop for ourselves, so that, you know, we're not just having a one-off event where we come out to people and say, this is who we are, this is what we're doing, goodbye, but we continue to hear from that group. So that's going to be built into the proposal. So, and you know, they're currently working on that to develop that as a team, and they'll share preliminary results with Sarah, I think, within the next couple of weeks. We're going to try to schedule something with you that doesn't intrude on your schedule too much, but then, you know, the commission will have, you know, something, you know, in writing as a proposal for a potential methodology to move forward on listening sessions.
Great. Do you want to say something about the handout?
Oh, yeah, sure. So this, let's see, I'm not sure.
Oh, no, the Jemez
It's in here,
principles.
yeah. It's the Jemez principles.
Jemez, sorry.
Jemez principles. Some of you might be familiar with these. These are principles for democratic organizing, and they come to us from the environmental justice movement. And the environmental justice movement, you know, exists because people have been removed from decision making, especially in communities where there were environmental hazards, toxics, placement of toxic uses, and that's, you know, globally, not just in New York City. But when environmental justice advocates meet, they use these principles to hold their meetings. You know, inclusivity. Inclusivity means that you recognize that people have been blocked from participation. You know, that there are key obstacles to participation. You have to be aware of them and take efforts to overcome them. The emphasis is on bottom up, that you're not just talking to leaders. You know, William, I think you mentioned this, but you need to talk to everyone up and down the chain. Letting people speak for themselves, you know, not assuming that we know what someone else needs, and making sure there's opportunity for everyone to speak. Working together in solidarity and mutuality, I think, you know, that's pretty clear that we want to be building toward a future that is informed by broad engagement. And building just relationships among ourselves, looking at our relationships to each other and seeing how we can build equity and inclusiveness into that. And a commitment to self-transformation, really thinking and reflecting on how we see the world and how we are reflecting back in the work that we do. So these are key principles that you know, students in the planning program are taught to use in their interaction with communities. So I thought, you know, Sarah suggested that these might be an interesting thing for us to take note of, and maybe lay the groundwork for how we engage.
Yep. I mean, I also wanted to say that when we spoke, I do feel very strongly that whatever we do in this area of listening sessions is something that we need to continue, and that it's not something we just do at the beginning and stop, but that we find a way to make that a part of our ongoing work. So hopefully there'll be some kind of toolkit or something that will emerge from this, you know, the students' work in this area. As we're kind of transitioning, could I ask my colleagues from NYC Service to please come up? And could someone hit, maybe it's Linda, because you're the closest, a power button on that? Did it go on? Is it blinking? So your PowerPoint is loaded. I thought we were talking in our very first meeting about what is civic engagement. And I'm sorry we didn't have time to really do the Q&A. But you know, obviously at the next meeting, maybe you can provide an update as to where things are. And then we can talk more. So the first meeting we talked about our definitions of civic engagement. And we also had talked last time about making sure we're not, you know, just focused on voting and looking at an array of civic engagement opportunities that we're trying to promote. So I wanted to invite NYC Service, who is a great agency partner in this space, to the Civic Engagement Commission, to just come and share a little bit about what they are working on. and this is part of just our internal sort of education about what's going on in different parts of the city in terms of civic engagement. So they're going to talk for a little bit, and then we'll hopefully have a few minutes for Q&A. But could I ask you, Laura and Debash, to introduce yourselves? And I think the mic is on. Might need to be just turned on.
It's on. Yeah, there we go. Actually, let me pull this off. Hi, my name is Debash. I am the Interim Chief Service Officer for the City of New York, and I lead NYC Service, an organization, an agency, a division of the Mayor's Office that you'll hopefully learn a little bit more about today. And my colleague, I'll let her introduce herself.
Thanks, Debash. I'm Laura Rogg. I'm the Director of Volunteer Strategy and Development, which focuses on our community work as well as youth work.
All right, great. So we'll begin. Just by a quick show of hands, maybe, how many of you have heard of NYC Service before? Okay, a few of you. All right, excellent, great. So what we're looking forward to doing is just talking a little bit more about our work, the direction that we're headed in, as well as some of the research and evaluation work that's done around volunteerism within our office, just to better understand how residents are engaging in service across the city. So we're very much looking forward to be here, and I want to thank Sarah for inviting us. And we're really hoping that, as the Civic Engagement Commission moves forward, that we find ways to work with you. So we're very much looking forward to that. So to talk a little bit about who we are, NYC Service is a division of the Mayor's Office. We're pretty much, you can think of us as the volunteerism, service, and civic engagement arm of the city. Our lens within civic engagement, I know because that can mean many different things, is really volunteerism and service. So that's our lens within civic engagement. We heavily rely on partnerships to do our work. So you'll see our mission there, building partnerships to deepen and expand civic engagement through volunteerism and service programs, all in an effort to create sustainable change on some of the city's greatest needs. And our vision is really advancing lifelong civic engagement, looking at our youngest New Yorkers all the way to our older adults. How do we build a more equitable and inclusive city by engaging everyone in the process? And then moving over to our values a little bit, these are the things that we think about when we do our work. Participation in lifelong civic engagement, we feel like it's a right for everybody in the city, but it's also a privilege and a responsibility. Diversity and inclusion, thinking about respecting the fact that residents bring a lot of lived experience to finding solutions to community challenges. Community is very important to the work that we do, and understanding that the communities and the organizations that exist within them that we work with are bringing a lot of assets to the table, and that collaboration is something that we rely on heavily to ensure that we can actually make an impact. So that's those are kind of the values that we think through when we're doing our work, when we're engaging with communities, and when we're building partnerships. All right, so to talk a little bit about our goals, and this aligns well with the values, but moving forward in the next couple of years, what we've been thinking a lot about is how we reach new communities. We have many different programs that we run. We're partnering with a lot of city agencies, nonprofits in the city, but we want to ensure that we're reaching communities that we haven't traditionally worked with. In addition to that, we want to partner with city agencies and mayoral offices with civic engagement centered priorities for greater impact, and that includes the Civic Engagement Commission. And then finally, developing systems for data collection and analysis, and we'll get a little more. We'll get into some of the data that we've collected and shared in the last couple of years. But that's something that's really important to us: understanding what does volunteerism and service really look like across the city, and how can we share that information with others, learn from it, and build programming that recognizes that. And then these are a couple of priority areas, so I'll just quickly run through them, but one area of our work is volunteer capacity building, working with city agencies and nonprofits to develop volunteer programs that engage residents as volunteers and partners in their work. National service and support, so if you've heard of AmeriCorps before, our organization, our office runs 4 different national service programs, otherwise known as AmeriCorps programs. And we also partner with other AmeriCorps programs across the city that also do similar work, thinking through best practices and how we can advocate for national service across the city. Public-private partnerships, so we look at how we can engage the business community and leverage employees in the business world and their skills to contribute to the city's greatest needs through volunteerism and service. Outreach, how do we reach colleges, universities, other resident-led groups, and understand their work better and partner with them to advance volunteerism and service. And then finally, volunteer strategy and development. So again, looking at the big picture, what is volunteerism and service in New York City? And then keeping a special eye on youth in particular, high school youth, and how they engage with the city and use their voice to contribute to solving some of our biggest challenges. So I'm gonna hand it over to Laura to talk a little bit about some of the research that I mentioned.
Great, thanks, Tabash. So one of the things that we think a lot about on the volunteer strategy team, and a question that we ask ourselves, if anybody's a fan of the show The Good Place, it's a central question in their show as well, of what do we owe each other as New Yorkers, as fellow human beings, as neighbors, as residents. And so there's really 2 points that I'm going to dive into today. Number one, sharing how we're expanding our work to better understand what resident engagement looks like across New York City. And then the second point is just to give you a quick overview of some of the things that we're learning and that we're starting to know about what engagement and civic engagement looks like in New York City. So our team really strategizes in 3 different ways. Number one, really looking at research, so critical thinking around and analysis around civic engagement, especially volunteerism. Because oftentimes volunteerism is seen as something that's nice but not necessary, and we really view volunteerism and service as critical to the well-being of communities and how people come together and feel that they have agency in their communities. The second piece is outreach, because also we can know a lot, but how do we translate this so that residents also understand it and can make decisions in their communities around it. And then finally, just the community part, which Tabash touched on, is that it's for us, it's fundamental to understand that communities are the experts already in there, and how do we help them provide more of a framework and more thought around what they can do together. So one of the things that we've been doing over the last couple of years are a couple of studies I'm going to talk about. And the first study really came, we conceptualized along with the Mayor's Community Affairs Unit, the Mayor's Public Engagement Unit, what does a civic engagement kind of spectrum look like? Because there are a variety of ways to engage in New York City. And really honoring that with this variety of ways, a lot of the research right now is saying people want to get involved, that they feel a responsibility to get involved, in particular in this time right now. So how do we really capitalize on that and recognize that there's so many ways that the city is working on this, and how do we bring those all together? So 2 things, studies that we've done. This first one was done about 3 years ago, and this was a study that we went door to door in Western Queens, spoke with over 850 people, and replicated a national survey that's usually done by the Corporation for National Community Service. So we spoke with over 850 people. We also did focus groups and talked with, I think, almost about 80 people in that. And really looked at and asked a lot of questions that were going on at the federal level. And it was something where we just kept saying, what if? Because when you look at the national data, and actually there's a good slide here, the national volunteer average was about 25%. When you looked at New York City data, New York City was about 14%. Through this study, we added one additional question to what the federal government asks, and asking about, do you volunteer on behalf of your house of worship for a religious organization? And that's where we saw a huge leap in engagement. So if you look on the top, it's a little small, but people were primarily volunteering for a religious group, house of worship, and this is beyond attending services, and for school groups. And then when you look down, especially when you look at this by race, this is especially where Black and Hispanic residents are engaging. So for us, it's really looking at a more encompassing vision of what volunteerism looks like across across the country, and also recognizing that understanding volunteering in religious groups is also a fundamental way to understand service in New York City. The other things that we found, the second finding was just that personal interest and identity drive people who are volunteering. That, I won't go into all of these, but fulfilling moral principles, allowing to make a difference, wanting to help people, wanting to respond to a specific need in the community were paramount to people in that. And then a couple other things, which should be no surprise to anybody here, but that if people were volunteering or attending town hall or community meetings, voting, that all of those things correlate together. So people who, again, it's not a surprise, but people who are engaging in one way tend to be engaged in another way. And we heard some really great stories in the narratives about how, that's how people found out about other things going on in their community, which led to other engagement. The final thing that we found in that study was looking at people who said they didn't volunteer and why, is that lack of time is huge. So in New York City, the average commute time is 45 minutes one way, which is the largest in the country, and that might have actually climbed a couple minutes in the last couple years. But that really finding opportunities locally, because we're spending 90 minutes of our day on buses and subways, walking in cars, finding opportunities that are local that you don't have to go a long way to access are really paramount. So that's informed a lot of our work. The second study that we did, we were really interested because this was so different than what we've heard on the national level and kind of the traditional ideas of engagement in New York City. So we wanted to try and replicate this on a citywide level. So this past year, we did a citywide survey of registered voters. They were sent an email and were able to click a link and then fill out a survey. So with this, we had almost 12,000 residents fill out this survey in New York City. And again, really found a lot of the things that were very consistent from the first study that we did door to door in Western Queens. And in this one, 52.8% of people said that they volunteered. So again, much, much higher than what's traditionally been thought of in New York City. And also, you can see in the bottom left-hand corner here, this is really going to help us, along with other city agencies, to really look at how do we inform, we were able to get neighborhood level data from this to really look at where are communities that we can be focusing efforts and really engaging in a variety of civic engagement behaviors in New York City. And again, this is very similar, so I won't go over it, but people were getting involved because they wanted to make a difference. People who didn't had too many time demands. The one that might be also particularly relevant in this one is also they don't like getting into political matters. So kind of seeing volunteering as synonymous with getting involved politically. Just to end, a couple other things that we do. We have our annual volunteers count report. This is something that we've now done annually for 5 years. And this is something in this last one that we publish it every April and it tracks the year before. And this last year, we, for the second year in a row, were able to track over 1 million volunteers in New York City from 420 nonprofits and also city agencies. And then we've also been mentioned in One NYC, and our goal is to increase that number and be able to track an additional 5% every year. And then we also offer a mayoral service recognition program where nonprofits and city agencies can nominate anybody who's served 100 hours or more, and they get a certificate that's signed by the mayor and chief service officer. So this last year we had about almost 4,000 people who received certificates, and that number grows very easily every year. And organizations really value being able to recognize their volunteers formally. And then finally, we're really using this and are looking in this next year to expand the impact and build the platform to really drive the civic engagement narrative in New York City. And how do we really look at this as a way to communicate to city residents, to city agencies, and to others about why and how people are engaging. So just returning back to our original goals and kind of my final thoughts, is really looking at the core of our work. That number one, engagement is providing residents agencies in their communities, allowing them to thrive through those connections. And the second piece is just really looking at volunteering as a way that residents are making impact on local levels and building into an equitable, into an inclusive city. And it's the core, I think, of who we are as a city right now. And with the administration and the example that we're providing across the country of the importance of engagement right now, and how do we really provide this opportunity at every turn for residents to engage. So anything else you want to add, Debash? All right, thank you so much.
We literally have about 2 minutes before we turn to public comment. So does anyone have any questions on anything that's been said? You do, Jose? Okay.
Yeah, I just want to say, I wanted to ask a question. The Mayor's Office for People with Disabilities is also doing some studying on civic engagement. Do you guys, and building partnerships, do you guys think that you guys can, partner with the MOPD and share some of this information with them?
Absolutely, and Dimash can speak to this, but we have an NYC Service Bureau that works with other offices and city agencies to build out volunteer platforms.
Yeah, absolutely. I think there are several mayoral units as well as other city agencies in this city that think about civic engagement in terms of their own work. And so we've worked with 19 of them last year, 19 different divisions. And we're working with about 12 this year, and we're looking to grow that where there is a definite connection and opportunity for collaboration, as well as civic engagement being a priority within their agency, whether it's across the board or within a particular program. Thank you for sharing that.
And the CEC will also work with MOPD for sure.
At all of the meetings.
Yeah. Oh, that's great. Okay. Yep.
A lot of rich data in your presentation. Is it available online or can it be shared?
It is, and I actually have copies of the first report in Western Queens. The second report hasn't come out yet, but that'll be available at our website as well.
We can also share this presentation.
Oh, that's great. Thank you.
One more question? Doesn't volunteerism also depend on neighborhood and education level? Because you got Western Queens, but Queensboro would be different than left, right.
We didn't highlight it here, but in the report itself, there's a lot of data that really, it breaks apart the notion of who's volunteering. Education doesn't make much of a difference, educational level. Income didn't make as much of a difference as well. So yes, these are all things that have been very interesting, I think, for us to really look at. And also, I think it's that expansion of looking at what does civic engagement constitute that really becomes more inclusive, that people are doing a lot more of it, that they themselves don't even think about that they're volunteering and engaging civically.
Right, and I think for us, it's also just recognizing that volunteerism and service comes in many different forms, and that people may not even call it volunteerism because it just may be like an inherent part of their culture or who they are, but that there are things that they're doing every day, every week that are really, that should be considered civic engagement.
So thank you so much.
Thank you. Yes, thank you so much.
Thank you
So will you leave the report or somewhere? I mean, you're welcome to continue to hang out, but I mean, yeah, okay. I didn't know if you were leaving or not. Okay, thank you. So the last part of the meeting is going to be public comment. We had 2 people who actually signed up. Oh, thank you so much for ending that blinding light. So the first person I'd like to call upon, and I think that mic is now turned on, is Jamila Rose, who's the Deputy Public Advocate of Civic and Community Empowerment for the Office of the New York City Public Advocate, Jumani Williams. Are you here? Is she here? No? Okay, sorry. Yes?
I'm sorry, I didn't know that you could sign in for questions. May I ask a question?
Just to clarify, this last segment isn't for Q&A. Maybe if we're at the end, if we're done, there might be a chance. But right now, we're going to take the comments from people who signed up to offer comments. So if Jamil is not here, the next person on the list was Kathy Park Price of Citizen Squirrel. She's also involved in participatory budgeting in her District 39, and also Brooklyn Community Board 6. So, Kathy, the floor is yours.
Thank you,
Thank
Dr.
you for being
Said.
here.
Thank you. Thank you for offering public comment. My name is Kathy Park Price. As Dr. Said said, I am a member of Community Board 6 in Brooklyn, chair of the Human Services Committee there, a member of the District Committee for City Council District 39, which is Bradlander, Park Slope, Carroll Gardens, Kensington, and also a member of the other CEC, CEC 15, which is the Community Education Council, our equivalent of school board in School District 15. also founder of Citizen Squirrel, which encourages families with young children to be civically engaged. I've met many of you. I'm proud to say I've been to all 4 of the commission's meetings. It's a priority, and I'm really excited about the work that you guys, that the commissioners are setting out to do. So I wanted to spend 1 minute talking about PB and 1 minute about Citizen Squirrel. In District 39, I started out as a PB cynic, and now I'm on the leadership team of PB in our district, the only district that has a district committee. So I submitted an idea one year, and my idea did not win, and separate from not winning, I also felt that it wasn't an equitable process. The next year, I wanted to get involved and became a delegate on the Parks and Environment Committee of PB. And this year, I'm on the leadership team because I want to influence the process, make it more inclusive and equitable. And I wanted to, we're entering cycle 9, and we have learned a lot in the district. We're still experimenting and evolving, and Amy, you're familiar with PB in the neighborhood, and I want to welcome the commissioners to audit come to our meetings. We are kicking off the process tonight in Kensington with our first neighborhood assembly of this next process, but we have been getting online submissions for ideas since June. So this is the most established PB process in the city, and I welcome other districts to connect with us, and I can be one of the contacts. So next, Citizen Squirrel. I started a year ago with the basic idea that civic engagement can be aged down and also look at the family as a unit. Because we often look at individuals, and we do sort of have this, I think, a barrier when we say, like people feel that your vote you don't really count until you can vote. And we are aging down. The discussion of lowering the voting age has come down, and there's groups like Generation Citizen that encourage and engage middle school students. High school students were once that frontier, middle school students, and Citizen Squirrel is saying families with elementary school students can be engaged in a meaningful way. And that comes from my experience as the mother of 2 small children, seeing that my kids do want that B-71 bus back because they want to get to the Children's Museum. So they really can participate and can see in tangible ways like how their participation can lead to concrete change and have an impact. So I'm planning the civic engagement workshop for families for January 2020. We had, the first one was a big experiment, and I didn't know what to expect. Over 50 kids and their families turned out on a January day in Park Slope, and it was a huge hit. You could Google it. If you Google Civic Engagement Calendar and Citizen Squirrel, it's up on the Citizens NYC website. And I would love for the commission to be part of this 2020 workshop, which it may be held at the Brooklyn Public Library, at the Central Branch, maybe in Park. We'd love to create, I have a template basically that I am offering to other neighborhoods, other community leaders, because I can't do it myself, but I want to create a template that others can share. So thank you very much. I think that's my 3 minutes, and thank you, Dr. Saeed, and thank you, commissioners.
If people have questions.
Yes. Citizen Squirrel, nyc@gmail.com. We're online, and I'm happy to give you my contact information. Oh, great.
Hi. So my question is, you mentioned neighborhood assemblies as the onboarding point for community input in the PB process. It's been my experience in Manhattan that council members, not just one, have been moving away from multiple neighborhood in-person assemblies and more toward online solicitation of ideas. I believe mostly that's because it takes a lot of staff to do these assemblies, and I'm wondering what your experience with that in Brooklyn has been, how effective has it been, and what your impressions are about the choices.
You're absolutely correct, Mark. We launched an online submission form last year, so it's only our second year, but we already have hundreds more submissions online. But we also get a lot of good feedback about the in-person assemblies, because the energy of a room, hearing other people's ideas often sparks other ideas, knowing what worked in the past, seeing how people present their cases. There's a need to have those in-person, but connections, those forums, but the online submissions, I understand, have been really popular and do address that need. Thank you.
I wanted to
Any
ask
other-
a quick question. First of all, thank you for being so civically engaged, Kathy. That's great. You mentioned that you went from cynic to leader in the PB process. Can you just give us a few quick thoughts on what that cynicism was? Can you tell us what led you to be a cynic?
Okay, so I'll be very brief because I know we're short on time, but I think, Murad, you mentioned like a street lamp costs $1 million. And yes, I saw that, schools need bathroom doors or tiles replaced. This process really focuses on, it's an equity issue. Those schools should have those things. They should have their AC, right? These are basic things. This $1 million and shouldn't be divvied up for essential things that our city should take care of without this process. But I also realized that over time, that the conversation around those projects doesn't end when the project wins or loses. So I saw that it's not just the vote, and it's not just who needs the most need, because the conversation begins, and those projects can still get funded when other organizations and groups see, okay, this is on the map now. It can put a project on the map. So I had a project for a sidewalk. I tagged it Litchfield Sidewalk in Prospect Park, in a parking lot that's used by pedestrians and shared with cars, and it's a really dangerous portion of the park, and it didn't win. But I'm told that the Prospect Park Alliance and Parks, they're creating that sidewalk. And I don't care if it didn't win. It's happening, and I know that it started with that conversation. And so I guess that's how it evolved, because it started with, there are so many awesome projects in schools and organizations that really need these things. They should have them too. Well, what are the other benefits? It's a gateway to participation, and I'm, kind of living proof of that. And I just want to share that enthusiasm with my neighbors and you all too. And I've said this before, but I want to emphasize that I want to support the commissioners on your listening tours and your initiatives as you grow and evolve.
Any other questions from the folks here, the commissioners? Any comments before we go back to? Yeah, Donna.
Kathy, you're going to share that information with us.
Sure. Can I share, Dr. Saeed, send it to you, and it will be circulated, about Citizen Squirrel and PB in District 39? Sure.
Okay, great.
Thanks.
Great.
Could I also take a group picture? 'Cause I think everyone's here, right? All the commissioners?
Virtually. We've got, I think Holly might still be on the phone, and also Lori is not here. But
Thank you.
thanks so much, Kathy. We have a couple of minutes left. I don't know if is Jamila Rose, did she come in? Okay. And there was somebody who had a question, so I think we can give a little time to. She left. Okay. Anyone else want to say something?
There's a hand.
You have a hand. There we go. Bitsy. Hi.
Hello, everybody. It is a real honor to be here, and thank you so much for making space for this and for accommodating me, even though I didn't sign up in advance. My name is Bitsy Bentley. I am an anti-racist democracy activist that has been heavily involved with participatory budgeting. I am also a member of District 39, and I will be serving as a budget delegate there this year. I have been working with the PBNYC data set for the last 2 years, doing analysis on what people pay for using participatory budgeting, and looking also at what the difference is between what City Council is spending money on versus what participatory budgeting is asking them to spend money on. And so I just wanted to share a couple elements of that, but also some ideas that I have that I think you should be considering. For me, civic engagement is how communities decide together, and this form of self-governing is the bedrock of a functioning democracy. Currently, there were 118,000 people who voted in the last cycle of participatory budgeting, and there were 250,000 people who showed up at the climate strike on Friday. So that's just a matter of scale that I'd like you to consider as I mention a couple of things. One is that last year there were 48 schools who did Civics for All that engaged in a participatory budgeting process for a small sum of money. This year there will be 150 New York City schools that will be doing that process. And this means that on July 1st, 2020, in all likelihood, over half the people with lived experience doing participatory budgeting in New York City will be teenagers or younger. And I just wanted to put that information in your heads as you consider what you want to do with this program. As far as the program is concerned, I look at PB on sort of 3 different levels. There are the program level decisions that really are about what the strategy of the overall initiative are. There are the process level decisions that are about what are the tactics that we use in order to implement that strategy. And then there are also the project level decisions, which are largely being done in concert with the city agencies that are required to implement the outcomes of the PB processes. When it comes to program level decisions, I think there are 3 different things that I would encourage you to consider. One is the pot of funding. Is it going to be capital or expense? Really great example that came up earlier was the issue of the self-defense classes that can be paid for with expense funds, but they can't be paid for with capital funds. One of the things that I've seen in my analysis of PB going back to 2012 is that the vast majority of these projects have not yet been implemented. And so people are not seeing the outcomes of that program within their communities on a day-to-day basis. I think this is one of the things that really challenges the adoption of participatory budgeting and discourages people from engaging. So considering the pot of money and what the restrictions are on the funds, I think it will be very important. The second element that I think is going to be important for you to consider is what are the audience that you are looking to address. It is not necessary to think about it in terms of every single person in New York City being engaged in a process for a citywide process. I've run out of time, haven't I?
Yeah, if you could just wrap up that sentence, and we'd love
Okay.
to have you back later.
Yeah, just something to consider. There are processes in other places of the world that focus on youth or elders or immigrant needs in a particular PB process. So just something to consider. Thank you so much for your time.
Yeah. Does anyone have any questions, comments?
Yes.
Can you share your report that you've created?
Yeah, I'm currently working on it, but yeah, I will definitely be sending it to Dr. Saeed for distribution to everybody.
We can also bring you back for, a presentation.
I would be thrilled to do so. It would be a real honor. Thank you. Any other questions?
Go for it.
I just have a comment. I'd love to hear more. So I just want to make sure that you do come back.
Yeah,
next time.
I will. I've been here for all of the meetings, and I will definitely be back. I am very keen to work with you.
Great. Yeah, Mark.
When you come back, and I hope you will soon, one of the things I'd like to hear more about is you were talking about the engagement of youth and the students' connection to PB.
Mm-hmm.
I'm aware of some schools that they actually have a course in civics or civic engagement. They call it different things. Is that
Precisely.
what you're talking about? And if so, will that be part of your report?
Yes, absolutely. So the Civics for All program, which is currently being rolled out for all New York City schools, is an integral part of that is an integral part of that Civics for All program. And as an anti-racist democracy activist, I think that program has a huge opportunity for us as New York to be a laboratory for what an anti-racist democracy could look like and developing that for the future. And I really hope that that is a result of the work that you are doing here as the Civic Engagement Commission.
We can actually ask DOE to come and present on the curriculum, Civics for All, and also the PB process from, the implementation side.
And it may be useful to look beyond that because there are some teachers who just have been doing this for years on their own before Civics for All was even created.
Oh, yeah.
Perhaps that's where Civics for All came from.
Yeah.
But I wouldn't want to limit our net.
Yeah, of course. Yep. I would love your input on how else we could add to that presentation. Yeah. Others? Okay. Well, thank you, Bitsy, for
Thank
that.
you so
Are
much.
there any other public comments at this time or questions from anyone in the audience? All right. I want to thank you all for being here for this, and hopefully we'll continue. Do you all like this format of doing the public comment at the end? We should keep doing that as we go along. Okay, great. So we're going to sort of move towards closing out this meeting, but I wanted to ask, are there any announcements or any issues that we missed from any, do any of the commissioners have anything to add or anything you want to add to the next meeting's agenda? Mm-hmm.
So as we continue to think through how we move forward with participatory budgeting, I'd love to hear from folks who are experienced in partnering with religious institutions, because I feel like, as Bitsy just mentioned, immigrants, and I think we saw a little bit reflected in the presentation from the NYC service that for certain communities, particularly immigrant communities, religious institutions is probably a place where civic engagement happens and is vibrant. So I'd love for us to think about how we can scale that. I'd love to hear from folks about some good practices around that, and I will just continue to put that on the table for us to think about how we engage religious institutions if we are truly committed to engaging this entire city.
I think that's a really great question, and maybe it's even something that we need to sort of systematically look at. Is like the question is, how have religious institutions been engaged in this process? And I don't know the answer to that.
Right.
And for the people who've done PB in their district, I don't know if you know the answer. Like, are there religious institutions participating?
And I just want to add beyond New York City's experience, perhaps there are other places that we can learn from.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
a really great point. Really great point. Terrific. Any other thing that you'd want to see included in future meetings?
I have a question. I think you and I spoke before about the possibility, and I think we're all thinking about this, moving these meetings into communities, public sessions, instead of hosting them always here at this time where not that many people have the ability to come in and see what we're doing and give us ideas. So maybe hosting them in all 5 boroughs. It doesn't have to happen every month, but
Yeah, I mean, we did talk about this a little bit, and I think it's, did you want to say something?
Yeah, the only thing about that we've discussed in previous meetings is accessibility. I know one of the other members of the commission, I think it's Holly, lives all the way out in Staten Island, and after the first meeting, she talked about how difficult it is for her to just get to these meetings from an accessibility standpoint. So I love the idea of being able to do it, but the reality is the city is not accessible enough. And you really see that in the outer boroughs. And I know that Jose drives or has access to that, but I don't. I really rely on public transportation, and it takes me hours to get, for example, I went the other day to visit family friends in the Bronx, and the only way I could do it was to pay for Ubers back and forth, and that cost a lot of money, and I wouldn't be able to do that on a regular basis.
So one thing we can do is encourage people in the communities to watch us and be part of the live stream. We can also talk about ways that we can maybe get people to participate online, right? Like we can set up that system for those who can't want to come but it's too far away. The other thing is that I think you're right. We do need to be out in the boroughs. We need to be doing more things. So we have to find a way to do that, whether, just to reach more people. So you're, very good point. Yeah.
We can talk about the listening session.
Yes.
Mhm.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, yeah.
So, one other thought is, I know we have a vast transportation system in the city, so if we can get transportation and meet at a central location and then be transported to the different areas, that may be a way for us to get from one place to another. If
That's
we
an
have
interesting idea.
transportation
Yeah.
assigned to us.
Or if.
It's like a school trip or something.
Yeah.
Mission
Exactly.
trip.
Yeah. Or if the city could cover costs for people who need, like, transportation. I think that's not a huge burden to ask either. I've seen it done in other venues, and I don't know why it wouldn't be able to be done here.
Yes. Yep.
And Sarah, just for clarification too, the next meeting is October 29th, is that correct?
Yes, yeah, just, so we have set the next 3 meetings. There was who was talking to me earlier about trying to make this regular? Like having it be like second Tuesday of every month or something. I'm not sure how we're gonna do that, because it's so hard to coordinate everyone's schedules. The times that we have listed for the next 3 meetings, 10:29, 4 to 6, 11:18, 4 to 6, 12:18, 4 to 6. These are times when I was able to get at least 8 people, which we do need to have a meeting. Part of the challenge is that there are people who can't make that time, and that was a time that had the most people. So it's a little bit of a struggle, but hopefully maybe there's ways that if we know ahead of time, people can sort of make arrangements for their conflicts. So if there are anyone else have any other comments? And if there's no other addition, do I hear a motion to adjourn the meeting? Okay. So the motion to adjourn has been seconded and thirded and fourth, I guess. So we are all in favor, so let's say aye. And I'm going to call this meeting to adjourn. Thank you so much, and look forward to seeing you all at the next meeting.